In a bit of breaking news, China is firing precision missile strikes into the Strait of Taiwan after Nancy Pelosi's visit. Not during, but after. I got away with saying it on Twitter, but I don't think I'd get away with saying it on YouTube, so we'll leave that one to your imagination. In other news, Kansas voters have resoundingly voted to protect their access to abortion in Kansas, and the left is taking this as the biggest victory lap in the world. They think right now that they're going to get 435 House seats, because, of course, everybody is up during every other year in the House. So that's what they think right now. I mean, if you watch them on Twitter, they actually believe this. So we'll be talking just a bit about that. In other news, on top of that, we have a reason that gas might be coming down here as Biden puts the approval on a multi-billion-dollar arms sale to Saudi Arabia and the UAE. And Wikipedia changes the editing rules over the word recession as the fight over the definition continues. It is going to be all this and more. You're my favorite breakfast tacos. I am Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. You know, I was never really much of a Sonic fan when I was younger, so, I mean, I kind of like the music that I keep hearing, and Ghost Town, the Spin Dash version of this, of course, the lo-fi version. It's all new stuff to me. Well, I guess as long as we've been listening to this playlist, it's really not new anymore, but, I mean, a lot of this stuff was new to me, and I had to go back and look up what some of the stuff was, and, you know, I kind of wish that I would have been a little bit more into Sega games when I was younger. I've tried to do some of them on the emulator, just trying to get the controls mapped out for the 3 buttons across versus the buttons in a square pattern, as most of your controllers are for emulators. I mean, not emulator, totally legitimate copies of digital backups of things that I own legally, totally. I mean, it's a little bit hard to get that translation coming back up out of there right now, so I don't get the full Genesis experience. It's kind of the same thing. I had written, and I don't listen to them anymore, but the Nintendo Cartridge Society, I'd written to them on one of the listener mail segments when all the mini consoles were coming out, all the retro consoles were coming out, and alleging to them and assuring them that, you know, with like the Nintendo, the mini Nintendo, or the Nintendo emulator versus the Super Nintendo emulator and the mini Super Nintendo, I mean, if you get a PlayStation controller, it's the same as essentially having a Super Nintendo controller, except you got better grips in there. And that's most of what I find in video game stores is a PlayStation style controller for USB. It's actually, I have 2 of them here for this computer, but they both have a little bit of damage into the controller from various moves that I've done, so I'm actually going to be getting a new one for the next time we emulate. But then with the Nintendo 64 controller, and I know that Midget is struggling with this, doing his playthrough of his totally legitimate copy of Ocarina of Time, or you just don't get the N64 experience unless you have that weird shaped N64 controller in your hand. So there's some stuff to that here. By the way, for those of you who pay attention to the video gaming side of things, we are going to be we're finishing Fallout 3, we're going to do Mass Effect. I have no idea how long that game is, by the way. And then I think we're going to go and do a totally legitimate copy, a data backup rather, of Chrono Trigger. for the Super Nintendo. Because I've heard great things about the game, but I've never played it, and I've been hearing music from it as well, and I want to go into that series. So that'll be coming down the pipes. I think that's going to be the order we do things, and I think we're going to do Pokemon after that. Maybe we'll find something else for the PC, but I think we'll do the Pokemon game after that. But anyway, that's a lot of stuff for us to go over here. Let's get down into the news. Before we get started, make sure you guys go check out the Daily Ignoramus, the Breakdown with Breckenhoff, the R-Rated Conservative, the Porch Boys. Go over on Twitter, check out Tweets by Brit, and KTZ is not here. Go check both of them out. KTZed and I are going to be working on a project, hopefully to improve my life off camera a little bit here, so I got to make sure that she gets the shout-outs. Check out all the true crime for that, and again, remember, the next one that she pops up, and we'll have dates and times to come as we go, is going to involve something that she claims to have direct involvement with. So go check out all those people. They're all great friends to the show, they're great friends to Liberty, and they are great friends to Truth and Freedom. So go and check all of them out. Let's get into the finance for the morning here, and then we've got some breaking news to go over. And I think we are going to try to stay real quick and on the clock on the finance side, because there's some stuff that's just breaking like overnight for us. It's middle of the day where it happened, but it's overnight for us. So let's get started. All right. Live chat up so I can see what you guys are saying. Seeing that kind of stuff. Let's get started. Looking into the Dow. The Dow spent the day up yesterday, and it looks like the futures are turned up as well. However, with the futures being turned up, it does appear that they have dropped from where they were overnight. Reading into some of the other sources that were off of this, CNN was saying, or I'm sorry, CNBC was saying that they were flat, while IBD is still saying that they're slightly up, but we'll see what happens with that. The Dow coming up to 32,812.50. So we will see what happens off of that. Looking in at Bitcoin for the day, it's given a roller coaster jump once again here, rising up from midnight on, and then just started faltering and maybe jumping around a little bit here before a steep drop-off, an attempted rally back, and then another drop-off, another attempted rally back, and another drop-off. Ending the day, or going through the day rather, not ending the day, up $62.90 to 22,887.90, backing that out to 5-day to see what it did throughout the day yesterday. There was another significant drop coming off of this here, bringing us back down, and across the 5-day, the Bitcoin is down $761 or 3.22%. Looking in at gas. Gas is keeping pace, by the way. Down in town. In Redacted, where I live, it's not keeping pace with what's happening in Madison, but Janesville actually is, surprisingly. It usually doesn't. It's usually 10 cents up, but I had to go throw a little bit of get me by gas in yesterday because we're waiting for payday. Because I'm stretched a little bit thin this week because of rent, unfortunately. But gas is actually keeping pace in Janesville. So, looking into the Madison side, though, $3.46 at the Costco seems to be the standard throughout. And we've got a couple outlier stations. Quick Trip in Madison on University Avenue is at $3.49. The Woodman's on Gammon is $3.49. And the Fleet Farm in DeForest is $3.49. Otherwise, everybody else is at the $3.46 mark. So some really good news on the gas front, and as I said before, we'll be talking later on in the show, way later, about some possible reasons why this might be. So we'll continue to watch this and see where this goes. Let's see what IBD has to say, and then I've got one from Investing.com, and then we'll get into the breaking news of the day from IBD. Dow Jones futures rise ahead of jobless data. Alibaba jumps on earnings. Yeah, I've got this feeling that the jobless claims, that's not going to be good news for the Biden admin right now. I don't know if it's going to be enough to move it to the 4% mark yet. But I think we might move 1/10 of a percentage point because we're starting to hear of a lot of layoffs. And trust me right now, that is something that is weighing on my mind with another venture that I'm working on off camera here. This is from Scott Latonin. Dow futures rose Thursday ahead of the first-time jobless claims data. Up next, investors await Friday's highly anticipated July jobs report. Key earnings movers Thursday include Albemarle, Alibaba, APA, IBD leaderboard stocks Cheniere Energy and Quanta Services, ELF Beauty, eBay, and Fortinet. Albemarle shares jumped 5% on strong earnings results. Advertisements come in to make sure that IBD gets paid for. Alibaba rallied 4%, APA inched up 0.2%, Cheniere rallied 3%. Quanta Services shares traded flat. ELF stock gained more than 3%, eBay edged higher, Fortinet tumbled more than 7%. Tesla traded up about 1% early Thursday. Elsewhere, Dow tech leaders Apple and Microsoft were effectively flat before today's stock market open. And Walmart lost a fraction after Wall Street Journal reported the company is laying off hundreds of workers in a restructuring effort due to its falling profits. Yeah, that's going to be good news for the first-time claims. If you can't get a job at Walmart. In the strengthening stock market environment, Dow stocks Chevron and United Health, as well as Equinor, Exxon, and Vertex Pharmaceuticals, are among the stocks to watch. Keep in mind that ongoing stock market volatility is a reason to stay more conservative despite recent signs of strength. Quanta, United Health, and Vertex are IBD leaderboard stocks. Chevron and Exxon were featured in this week's Stocks Near Buy Zone column. Exxon was Friday's IBD stock of the day. On the futures, Dow futures traded cautiously higher Thursday ahead of the jobs data. Dow futures gained 0.1% and the S&P rose 0.2%. NASDAQ rose 0.3%. Remember, pre-market action in Dow futures and elsewhere doesn't necessarily translate into actual trading in the next regular stock market session. I'm so used to them saying overnight action, not pre-market action. Among the ETFs, the NASDAQ tracker Invesco QQQ Trust moved up 0.3%, and the SPDR S&P 500 tracking the S&P and the Dow gained 0.2%. The 10-year yield ticked lower to 2.69% Thursday morning, on pace to snap a 2-day winning streak. The 10-year Treasury yield is trying to rebound after hitting its lowest level since early April. Meanwhile, U.S. oil prices rose as West Texas Intermediate futures traded around $91 a barrel. First-time jobless claims are due out at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Econoday estimates expect initial unemployment claims rise to 260,000 versus 256,000 versus the previous week. Well, it's after 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. News. Nothing has dropped yet. Let's try this search term. And according to CNBC, weekly jobless claims rise to 260,000 ahead of non-farm payrolls report. Hey, I bet you they're not going to be saying hashtag Biden boom on Twitter today. That's what we have for that. Let's grab one from Investing.com. Okay, I guess we can't grab one from Investing.com because we noticed you're using an ad blocker. Screw you. Let's get into the main news of the day. Starting with some breaking news overnight for us and in the middle of the day over there from Politico. U.S. watches anxiously as China threatens missile launches near Taiwan. From Lara Seligman and Paul McCleary. Washington is on edge as China readies a series of provocative military drills set to kick off on Thursday in response to House Speaker Pelosi's visit to Taiwan. Beijing has threatened incursions into the island's territory, and for the first time, conventional missile launches over the island. The Chinese Navy is positioning warships around the island, including its 2 aircraft carriers that have left port in recent days in what officials described as a blockade. The Chinese Defense Ministry released a map of 6 zones surrounding the island where it plans to conduct the drills, some of which potentially overlap with Taiwan's territorial waters. The live-fire exercises will begin at noon local time on Thursday and last for 3 days. Meanwhile, Taiwan was forced to scramble fighter jets on Wednesday to respond to 27 Chinese military aircraft that flew through its air defense zone, a large area that includes Taiwan's airspace and extends over mainland China. according to its defense ministry. According to a similar incursion on Tuesday, 22 of those crossed the median line into the Taiwan Strait, which sits 12 nautical miles from the shore and separates the island from mainland China. Crossing the center line is a rare move that Beijing preserves for sending stronger signals, but Beijing has done so before, pushing aircraft into the median line for the first time in 20 years in 2019, and has done it so again in several occasions since then. Officials say they see China's moves thus far as mostly bluster, but there are signs that Beijing is planning more provocative military actions during the upcoming exercise. China has never been before flown aircraft or launched missiles into Taiwan's territorial waters, something that could happen during the drills, said Bonnie Glaser, an East Asia analyst at the German Marshall Fund of the United States. And it looks like they went in and beyond that, too. Chinese state media, tightly controlled by the ruling Communist Party on Wednesday, called the exercises unprecedented and said the missile launches and naval blockade of the island demonstrate the Chinese mainland's absolute control over the Taiwan question. The drills will involve China's most sophisticated military equipment, including J-20 stealth fighters, H-6K bombers, Type O-52D destroyers, Type O-56A corvettes, DF-11 short-range ballistic missiles, and DF-17 hypersonic missiles, the state-run Global Times reported. U.S. officials are particularly concerned by the Times' claim that when People's Liberation Army forces enter Taiwan's territorial waters, the so-called median line will cease to exist. The Chinese are looking to deliberately do something that they've never done before, Glaser said. The Chinese Defense Ministry's map shows closure zones in large areas of water surrounding Taiwan, which Beijing warned ships and aircraft not to enter during the drills that are large enough to suggest Beijing will launch cruise as well as ballistic missiles, Glaser said. U.S. officials have for days tried to defuse tensions, downplaying the speaker's visit as nothing out of the ordinary. John Kirby, a spokesperson for the National Security Council, said Tuesday, "The U.S. will not engage in saber-rattling." Well, why would they? They are, and we'll be looking at a tweet and a video that shows that a little bit later, fully in support of the One China policy. They believe that Taiwan is actually a territory of China. Just ask them. There's no reason, as I said yesterday, for Beijing to turn this visit, which is consistent with long-standing U.S. policy, into some sort of crisis or use it as a pretext to increase aggressiveness in military action in or around the Taiwan Strait, Kirby said. But overnight, this tensed up a little bit further. China fires missiles near Taiwan in live-fire drills as PLA encircles islands. From Brad Lendon over at CNN. China fired multiple missiles towards waters near northeastern and southwestern Taiwan on Thursday, the island's defense ministry said, as Beijing makes good on its promise that Taipei will pay a price for hosting U.S. Speaker Nancy Pelosi. The Chinese military's Eastern Theater Command said in a statement that multiple missiles had been fired into the sea off the eastern part of Taiwan. It said all the missiles will hit their targets accurately. The entire live-fire training mission has been successfully completed, and the relevant air and sea area controls now lifted, China's statement said earlier. The Eastern Theater Command said it had conducted long-range live-fire training in the Taiwan Strait, the state broadcaster CCTV reported, as part of the planned military exercises around the island. Taiwan reported Chinese long-range rockets had fallen near the islands of Matsu, Wukou, Dongyan, which are in the Taiwan Strait, but located closer to the mainland. When the main island of Taiwan, it later said, a total of 11 Dongfeng missiles were fired into the waters north and east of the island between 1:56 p.m. and 4 p.m. local time, or approximately 1:56 a.m. to 4 a.m. Eastern Time on Thursday. Chinese state media said the exercises simulate an air and sea blockade around Taiwan had started Wednesday but offered little solid evidence to back up the claim. Later Thursday, images showed military helicopters flying past Pingtan Island, one of Taiwan's closest points to mainland China. The military posturing was a deliberate show of force after Pelosi left the island on Wednesday, bound for South Korea, one of the final stops on the Asian tour that ends in Japan this weekend. Within hours of the departure from Taipei on Wednesday, the island's defense ministry said China sent more than 20 fighter jets across the median line in the Taiwan Strait, the midway point between the mainland and Taiwan, that Beijing says it does not recognize but usually respects. So, it's popping off over China. Some stuff to watch here. Looks like CNN has some footage for us. Let's see what they have. Come on.
Tonight, the Chinese military carrying out live fire drills surrounding Taiwan after sending 27 warplanes into Taiwan's air defense zone. All of it is part of an intimidation effort on Taiwan and also to strongly protest the visit by the Speaker, Nancy Pelosi. Well, China obviously is livid here at the highest levels. President Xi, with these live military exercises where you are essentially now surrounded, you've got these live drills going on as we speak, sending a very clear message.
And the message is, hey, Taiwan, don't forget, we have a defense budget 15 times the size of you, and we have many, many more weapons, and we could easily take you. I mean, that is clearly intimidation. And it is clearly a result of Nancy Pelosi being here at this time, a couple of months before Xi Jinping's unprecedented third term at the Party Congress. Did the trip need to happen now? It wasn't supposed to happen now. It was supposed to happen in April, but Pelosi got COVID, and so they rescheduled for this time. But she just, despite people warning her, President Biden and the Defense Department, the Pentagon saying, hey, this might not be a great time, they went through with it, and so she had 20, very friendly and, uplifting hours with the Taiwanese leadership, and they, of course, were thrilled to have, somebody with a Democratic career like Pelosi's, speaking to folks at their young democracy. But then 20 hours later, she's back on the plane, she's out, and Chinese ships are surrounding, Taiwan in 6 different locations, opening fire. So what's the cost-benefit analysis of this trip here is the question, Aaron.
All right, so that's some of the footage that we see off of that. And I mean, why wouldn't they? They came back and said, don't do it, don't do it. And Nancy said, oh, I'm going to do it. And I might have said, no balls, Xi Jinping. No balls. But we'll continue to watch this and see where this goes. Let's grab one from Fox News. China fires precision missile strikes in Taiwan Strait day after Nancy Pelosi concludes controversial visit. I don't see that there's any new information off this one. Let's skip this one and remind everybody what it is that they think about Taiwan. From Breaking 911, John Kirby, I'll let the speaker speak for herself. We do not support Taiwan independence.
Admiral, one on Taiwan, if you would, and one on the Middle East very quickly. You keep telling us that U.S. policy hasn't changed and that the United States does not support an independent Taiwan. And yet, if we look at what Speaker Pelosi tweeted from the ground in Taiwan, her post actually states, quote, America stands with Taiwan. We all know that Taiwan harbors ambitions toward independence. When the Speaker of the House says, we stand with Taiwan, America stands with Taiwan, how can the Chinese construe that as anything else but that you're supporting independence?
I'll let the Speaker speak for herself. All I can tell you, James, is what I told you yesterday, and I'm happy to repeat it. Nothing has changed about our adherence to the One China policy. Nothing has changed about our stance on Taiwan independence, which is that we do not support Taiwan independence. And nothing has changed, James, about our commitments and how seriously we take those commitments under the Taiwan Relations Act. Everything is consistent, James. I can't say that any more clearly.
So it's going to be kind of interesting to see which direction they go with this here. Are they going to come out and say, we love democracy, we love American freedom? Honestly, my big one here is going to be how does the executive branch square this with their people who say, well, we love democracy and we have to go fight for democracy, especially given their same fight going along with Ukraine right now. That's definitely one that you need to go back and look at what's going, because they're saying that they have to be in Ukraine. We have to aid and send billions of dollars over to Ukraine to defend democracy over autocracy. Whereas legitimately, when we look at Taiwan versus China, that is democracy versus autocracy. We've got one branch of the government saying, "Oh no, we recognize Taiwan's independence and their claim to democracy," and we've got the executive branch coming out and saying, "No, we recognize China's claim over this because we have to, because we have agreements for it." And I'm not necessarily sure which direction they're going to go. And most interestingly, I want to see where their little followers go. However, I do think that the mainstream media is going to downplay this as much as they can, because with the contractual and treaty obligations of the executive branch, they're kind of between a rock and a hard place. And if they go against the treaties, then they're opening themselves back up to retaliatory actions, which, I mean, we know China doesn't really have a lot of those, but if they kowtow to their fans, or if they kowtow to the treaties, then all those people who say democracy is the most important thing in the world have a legitimate claim to say, hey, what's going on here? But the live fire has started, so we'll continue to watch this situation and see where it goes. All right. Let's move on to what was supposed to be the top story today until the stuff happened in China. From CBS. GOP Rep. Jackie Walorski killed in car crash, sheriff says. This is from Melissa Quinn. Republican Representative Jackie Walorski of Indiana was killed in a car crash Wednesday, the Elkhart County Sheriff's Office said. Sheriff Jeff Siegel said Walorski, 58, was in an SUV traveling southbound when it was hit head-on by another car just after 12:30 p.m. All three occupants in the vehicle, Walorski, her district director Zachary Potts, and communications director Emma Thompson, died as a result of the injuries. The sole passenger of the other car involved in the crash, which was traveling northbound, also was pronounced dead at the scene, according to Siegel. Boy, do I have questions about this one. Speaker Pelosi ordered the flags of the Capitol to fly at half-staff. Her spokesperson, Drew Hamill, said, "Flags at the White House will also be flown at half-staff on Wednesday and Thursday in Walorski's memory," the White House said. Walorski was elected to represent Indiana's 2nd Congressional District, which includes South Bend, in 2012. After serving 3 terms in the State House, she was top Republican on the House Ethics Committee and served on the Ways and Means Committee. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy confirmed Walorski's death in a tweeted statement from her office, noting that her husband, Dean Sweetheart, was informed the Congresswoman had been killed in the collision. She has returned home to be with the Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, the statement said. Please keep her family in your thoughts and prayers. Senator Braun told reporters, "I just learned about an hour or so ago. It's one of those things that takes the absolute air out of you. I was on the phone and a text came through, spent a lot of time with Jackie, got to know her early. When I stuck my neck out into the political realm, he said that she was always a good friend and added, when it's close to home and you know the people, it's tough to get through." Tributes for Walorski quickly poured in from elected officials on both sides of the aisle and members of Indiana's congressional delegation. President Biden said in a statement that he and First Lady Jill were shocked and saddened, man, by the news. Walorski spent a lifetime serving the community she grew up in. We may have represented different parties and disagreed on many issues, man, but she was respected by members of both parties for her work. Rep. Kevin Brady, the top Republican on the Ways and Means panel, said the Congresswoman was the happy Hoosier who would light up a room with her joy, passion, brilliance, and love of life. There is nothing that Walorski couldn't do, he tweeted. Carolyn Maloney, a Democrat from New York, said on Twitter, "She's absolutely heartbroken, and my heart goes out to the families of each of these victims," while fellow Indiana Rep Jim Banks praised Walorski as a true public servant, selfless, humble, and compassionate. So, with that, I mean, it's now been overnight, and I do question some of the circumstances surrounding the death. With all the advanced safety features in cars at this point, the circumstances that are involved with this is car was traveling at middle of the day, crossed center line, straight head-on collision, all people involved were killed. No witnesses. Under normal circumstances, I would say freak accident, and I've seen this happen with people. A girl I went out with in high school, it actually had happened to her. She'd been drawing herself way too far, trying to do too much. School, work, etc. Extracurriculars, things like that, and driving down the road, fell asleep at the wheel, and crossed center line herself. She did survive. I don't want to go diving too deep into this, but yeah, I do have some questions about this as well. So we will see what happens with this and where this goes. And actually, honestly enough, the worst part of this is not the fact that I do have to question political motives and possible Clinton body count. The worst part of this is some of the reaction from Twitter. This thing that I hate today. We'll be going through the CNN tweet about this and reading some of the toxic, vile dribble coming from people who have been trained for their entire lives to hate all Republicans no matter what. But for now, until we start to get some details out about this, my heart goes out to, and I think I can say honestly on behalf of everybody at Turn Spades Productions, all the creators, our hearts go out to the family who are dealing with this tragedy right now, and the people that were close to Walorski. Let's talk about Kansas. Kansas voters resoundingly protect their access to abortion. From John Hanna and Margaret Stafford. Kansas voters on Tuesday sent a resounding message about their desire to protect abortion rights, rejecting a ballot measure in a conservative state with deep ties to the anti-abortion movement that would have allowed the Republican-controlled legislature to tighten restrictions or ban the procedure outright. It was the first test of voter sentiment after the U.S. Supreme Court's decision in June that overturned the constitutional right to abortion. Can somebody actually go through the Constitution and show me where this right is, by the way? Providing an unexpected result with potential implications for the coming midterm elections. While it was just one state, the heavy turnout for the August primary that typically favors Republicans was a major victory for abortion rights advocates. With most of the vote counted, they were prevailing by roughly 20 percentage points, with the turnout approaching what's typical for a fall election for governor. The vote also provided a dash of hope for Democrats nationwide grasping for a game changer during the election year, otherwise filled with dark omens for their prospects in November. This vote makes it clear what we know. The majority of Americans agree that women should have access to abortion and should have the right to make their own health care decisions, President Biden said in a statement. After calling on Congress to restore the protections of Roe and federal law, Biden added, and the American people must continue to use their voices to protect the right of women's health care, including abortion. The Kansas vote also provided a warning to Republicans who had celebrated the Supreme Court ruling and were moving swiftly with abortion bans or near bans in nearly half the states. Kansans bluntly rejected anti-abortion politicians' attempts at creating a reproductive police state. The worst part about this and we'll be looking at other articles that go with this, is Kansas. Well, Democrats across the country are going to look at this, and they're going to do what Democrats always do, and they're going to overstretch. And they're going to use this to say, yes, we must have Congress pass abortion on demand up to 9 months, up to crowning. Just you wait. This is going to be overstretched in a massive, massive fashion. Today's vote was a powerful rebuke and a promise of the mounting resistance. The proposed amendment to the Kansas Constitution would have added language stating that it does not grant the right to an abortion. A 2019 state Supreme Court decision declared that access to abortion is a fundamental right under the state's Bill of Rights, preventing a ban, potentially thwarting legislative efforts to enact new restrictions. The referendum was closely watched as a barometer of liberal and moderate voters' anger over the Supreme Court's... Oh my... The editorializing of this tells me that this is set and right for an overstretch of the magnitude you have never seen before. So we talked about this when we talked about the overstretch of Congress. The vast, vast, vast majority of Americans, and most of us, probably live in a political bubble and believe that everybody in America believes like we do. Life begins at conception. Don't punish the baby for the sins of the father, etc. Because for the most part, that's all that we see. The vast majority of Americans are in favor of first trimester medical induced. Life of the mother, emergency, victim of rape, victim of incest, etc. Victim of kitty diddling, which I guess would fall under rape. The vast, vast, vast majority of this country is in favor of that. In double-digit multitudes, I might add. But as we see, when we see things from people like Kimberly Inez McGuire, or Joe Biden, or Nancy Pelosi, they're going to take this to mean that, oh, the baby is crowning, oh, it's healthy, but it might have Down syndrome. It might not be the right gender, it might be this, it might be that. Oh, well, stick that needle in its head. Ooh, body parts. They are going to overstretch this. The other side of this, and this goes out to the Republican side, because Republicans are rebuking Kansans right now for voting for this. We're trying to find some reason to square the circle to justify how this means that they can go and criminalize this on a national level. The main argument that I heard, and I was a proponent of this argument too, and in fact, the main argument of why Roe fell is because most people said, we want this to be done on a state level, thinking that they could run out to places like Kansas, Kentucky, Wyoming, and get near total bans on a state level and then start to push the needle and the pressure to get the rest of the country to go back in and along with it. There you go. The state spoke. This was done at a state level. If you don't like it, have your legislature bring up another ballot initiative and churn out the vote for it. But the state has spoken. This is a states' right issue. I don't like what the state said, but that doesn't change the fact that they've spoken. But this is just telling me that both sides are going to try to overstretch on this. The referendum was closely watched as a barometer of liberal and moderate voters' anger over the Supreme Court's ruling. Yeah, and that's the problem. This is one state. Now, I haven't looked into what the state was and see what the turnout was for the primary votes. If they match in line, Like, I'd like to see if the number of people who voted no on this amendment question is the same number of people who voted for the Democratic House seat. No, Kansas doesn't have any Senate seats this year. Or every other election that's on the table for them. Their local seats, etc. Because really, honestly, even for the more populist conservative side, I think that they would probably come back and say, hey, let's put this in here so we can take care of things that happen in the first few weeks. Rather than just a major draconian ban. This is not the barometer that you guys think that this is. But that's what we see for that. Let's grab one from CNN. Kansas will not be our last fight. Abortion rights victory gives Democrats new hope for midterms. Yep, overstretch. Just like I said. From Dan America. It isn't often that Democrats look to deep red Kansas for a resounding affirmation, but on Tuesday, when Kansans overwhelmingly voted to keep protections for abortion rights in their state, that's exactly what happened. The size and scope of the result were a shock to even the most optimistic Democrats. Not only did voters reject a proposed constitutional amendment that would have opened the door to strict abortion laws in the Republican state, but they did it by turning out in huge numbers, dwarfing turnout in a more recent primary election and signaling that the issue can motivate even Republican-leaning voters in a state that former President Trump won by 15 points in 2020. The political impact of what happened in Kansas will be directly felt in the November midterm elections, particularly their overstretching, particularly in races for governor and attorney general after the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, throwing the issue of abortion to the states. The June ruling has led to bans on the procedure being enforced in several states, while opening the door to more restrictions rather than others. At least 4 other states will be voting on abortion-related ballot measures this November, but Democratic strategists are looking to the Kansas result to extrapolate lessons for states where abortion won't be on the ballot. As the first state to vote on abortion rights following the fall of Roe, Kansas is a model for the path to restoring reproductive rights across the country through direct democracy, said Alexis McGill, president of the Planned Parenthood Action Fund. We know Kansas will not be our last fight or our last victory. Democratic and Republican operatives acknowledged Wednesday that the result in Kansas, while limited to one state, could shift the way each party approaches the midterms. Democrats, buoyed by polling and the Kansas result, will likely attempt to make abortion a top issue in the key races, hoping to link their Republican opponents to support for stricter abortion laws. Republicans likewise will continue to be cautious on the issue, largely ignoring their party's long-held desire to tighten abortion laws across the country, and instead hoping to keep the focus on the economy. I think our Republican candidates are going to keep focusing on the issues most important to voters, and every poll keeps saying the rising costs and the economy, said Republican operative working in the House races. A GOP operative working on Senate races added, the midterms are not going to happen in a vacuum, and there are other issues that voters are considering when they cast their ballot in the fall. It's not going to be an up or down vote on the issue. Democrats were more hopeful that the Kansas result was a positive sign for the party's midterm prospects amid low approval ratings for President Biden and a rising inflation and other economic concerns. We already know the majority of Americans support abortion rights, but the last night's result in Kansas showed us it's also a motivating factor for voters, said Xochitl Hinojosa, a Democratic operative and managing director at progressive consulting firm Bully Pulpit Interactive. We'll likely see more Democratic candidates learn from Kansas and lean on the threat and urgency of abortion bans across the country and start communicating that directly to voters. They are going to overstretch. They are going to overstretch. And they're going to lose their behinds to do so. And that's one of the things that goes along with this too. Because they've championed their message. They put their message on Republicans total ban. All Republicans equal complete total 100% ban. Now, the worst part of this for Democrats is they seem to believe that this means that they're going to turn Kansas completely blue. All their House seats, their governor, I think their governor already is a Democrat, isn't it? I'll have to look at that. All their House seats, all their Senate seats, all their legislature, it's all going to be completely blue because we turned out for this. What they've forgotten about with something like this is the fact that because this is in their state's constitution, this means that they can focus on candidates who will focus on the destruction that Democrats are doing to the economy. They've taken an issue away from campaigning for Democrats. Honestly, and this is me looking at this from a completely strategic standpoint, not necessarily wanting this to happen, but the best thing that could have happened for Democrats is for this ballot initiative to pass. And you might have turned a significant majority of the Kansas legislature and all of their House seats blue if this had passed. Because you have that to campaign on, and now people can sit back and ignore the fact that the gas is up $3. They can sit back and ignore the fact that their factories are shutting down and unemployment is going up. Their farm yields aren't turning out as much as they could have. They can sit back and ignore all this and just focus on the fact that if I can't murder my baby, my life might turn out the way that I dreamed it was going to be. Strategically, this was probably the worst thing that could have happened for Kansas Democrats. And it's funny to me that they don't realize this. Changing America! From the Hill, after Kansas, 4 more states set to vote on the future of abortion. From Shirin Ali. Six weeks after the Supreme Court ruled to overturn the constitutional right to abortion that was never there, the procedure is on the ballot in pockets of the country, and voters are now casting their vote. Voters in Kansas went first on Tuesday night, ultimately striking down an abortion ban, and now 4 more states will have their turns in the coming months. Abortion-related ballot measures have been cropping up across the country in the wake of the Supreme Court ruling in June to overturn Roe, a nearly 50-year precedent that affirmed abortion as a constitutional right. At least a dozen states initially reacted by enacting trigger laws, which are abortion bans and restrictions designed to take effect immediately, or with quick state action following the downfall of Roe. Some states are hoping to turn voters in order to determine the future of reproductive rights. It begins with Kansas, one of 5 states to have an abortion-related measure included on its primary ballot. The Kansas No State Constitutional Right to Abortion and legislative power to regulate abortion amendment asks voters to weigh in on a proposed state constitutional amendment that says the right to an abortion is not protected by the state constitution. Kansas voters resoundingly rejected the measure, with nearly 60% of voters indicating no. Now 4 other states will pose similar measures to voters that address the future of abortion. California, which is doing so on a symbolic measure because there's no way that there's no way in hell that you won't be able to sacrifice your young to Moloch in California. Moloch lives in California, for God's sake. Kentucky. On November 8th, voters in Kentucky will be able to vote on whether their state's constitution should be amended to lay out that nothing in the state constitution creates a right to an abortion or requires government funding of abortions. The government funding aspect of that is going to be an interesting twist to that, rather. Montana. Voters in Montana will get to weigh in on the state statute known as Medical Care Requirements for Born Alive Infants measure. It states that infants born alive at any stage of development should be considered legal persons, require medical care to be provided to infants born alive after induced labor, C-section, attempted abortion, or other method, and establish a $50,000 fine or 20 years as maximum penalty for violating the law. Well, yeah, if you're born alive, that kind of fits the definition that the pro-aborts are trying to come out and say, the magical canal that somehow endows humanhood, where you're not a human before you pass through the magical canal. Vermont. Vermont is taking a similar approach to California. Yeah, that's going to be a foregone conclusion too. That's just symbolic. So, there are your 4 states that are coming up in the near future for that. Here's what Token University has to say about the Supreme Court. This is interesting. Tell me you know nothing about government process without telling me you know nothing about government process.
From day one, when the Supreme Court made this extreme decision to take away a constitutional right, it was an unconstitutional action by them, a right that was around for almost 50 years, a right that women had to make a decision.
If a right was only around for 50 years, it wasn't a right. It was a privilege extended by your government. I hate that argument. Your rights are something you're inherently born with. The right to attempt to keep yourself alive. Even in the face of somebody else's intervention. The right to be free of enslavement from other people. And the right to pursuit of happiness. The right to attempt to make your situation better. Not the right to succeed, but the right to attempt to make your situation better. You know why those are rights? Because you automatically have them. As soon as your little swimmer meets the egg, you have those rights. If it's only been around for 50 years, it wasn't a right. Now, there are arguments that could be made questioning whether or not the abortion access is one of those rights based on the pursuit of happiness. I think that is a really dangerous path to go down. But I'm willing to hear the arguments about that at least.
Decision on their bodies and how they want to start their families from day one.
Have you ever tried not screwing? Anyway, from the post-millennial, White House declares Supreme Court ruling on Roe unconstitutional, confirms Medicaid to be used to fund abortions. Yeah, the Hyde Amendment's going to have something to say about that, except for the fact that it was pointed out by Autumn Fox on several posts on Twitter that the Hyde Amendment has already been violated and Medicaid is already used for that. From Hannah Nightingale. In Wednesday's White House press conference, Press Secretary, Token University hire, called out the Supreme Court's June overturning of Roe v. Wade as unconstitutional and declared that an executive order signed by President Biden shortly after would not violate the Hyde Amendment. From day one, when the Supreme Court made this extreme decision to take away the constitutional right, it was an unconstitutional action by them. A right that was around for almost 50 years, and a right that women had to make a decision about their own bodies and how they want to start their families. Token University hire told reporters on Wednesday. In a separate question, one reporter pressed Diversity hire on how using Medicaid to fund travel expenses to obtain an abortion would not violate the Hyde Amendment. on the proposal to have Medicaid fund travel expenses for women seeking abortion, how would that not violate Hyde if it's using taxpayer dollars to pay for abortions? Let's listen.
Let me just clear it up just one final time.
Yeah.
So on the Medicaid, going back to the first question, on the Medicaid, on the proposal to have Medicaid fund travel expenses for women seeking abortion, how would that not violate Hyde if it's using taxpayer dollars to pay for abortions?
This EO will not violate the Hyde Amendment. It is law, and we follow the law here.
Yeah, that's what you do. I'm willing to hear the arguments as to why this is constitutional or unconstitutional. I don't believe you. But you know what? I'm willing to hear your arguments. So, token diversity hire, cite me specific lines in both the articles and the amendments of the Constitution as to where this is, and we'll have a discussion. I don't believe you, but I'm willing to hear you out on this. You seem to have the people that feed you your scripted lines have told you that this is actually a thing. So I want to hear it. Show me. Show me exactly where. Let's talk about more primary stuff from yesterday. From AZ Central, Kari Lake's lead grows in governor's race. As counting continues, Katie Hobbs puts focus on November. From Stacey Barshinger, the race for Arizona's next governor has come into focus with Secretary of State Katie Hobbs capturing the Democratic slot by a wide margin and former TV anchor Kari Lake climbing into a narrow lead for a Republican nomination. Though the Republican race was too close to officially call, Lake declared victory on Wednesday afternoon as ballots cast on Election Day were counted and pushed her ahead of opponent Karine Taylor-Robson's advantage among early voters. Well, hang on, they have to find or create new votes in Maricopa County. We're so proud of this moment, Lake said during a news conference on Wednesday. We're so proud of the victory that we have, and we're going to lead the state to the brightest days ahead. A spokesman for Taylor-Robson declined to comment about Lake declaring victory with a race yet to be called. No matter who is the nominee on the Republican side, Arizonans in November are poised to elect their fifth female governor, more than another other state. Okay, let's see if we can translate the typo. I'm going to say that is more than any other state in the country, rather than more than another other state in the country. If Lake secures the nomination, the sprint to November's general will pit one of the state's loudest 2020 election deniers. Lake and his chief defender, Hobbs. Hobbs, 52, sent a victory speech Tuesday to supporters gathered at the Crescent Ballroom in Phoenix that she sought to move past the election 2 years ago. Well, then you need to go and call your friend Liz Cheney and say, if we're going to move past the election, we got to shut down the January 6th committee. And by the way, we see climate deniers, science deniers, election deniers. The left is a religion. All government worship is a religion. Two religions. There is MAGA, and there is progressivism. Those are religions, and they are quick to label you as a heretic, at least on the progressive side. Although they're pretty quick to label you as a heretic on the MAGA side too. Reminder, I'm blocked by Cat Turd. Because I still think Marjorie Taylor Greene is a plant. But Kari Lake is a heretic. She's an election denier. But it is looking like Kari Lake is going to win. They're going to try to honk. They're going to try and honk and honk and honk, but it does look like Kari Lake is going to win. It's interesting that it's taken them 2 days to get this counted. It's like the Dr. Seuss rhyme from Al Gore in 2000 that was passed around on the boomer internet at the time. I'll count and count and count again. I'll count until the state is mine. Here's an op-ed from Columbia Journalism Review. Kari Lake and the danger of local news anchors jumping into politics. From John Alsop. Kari Lake, a news anchor at Fox 10, a local TV station in Phoenix, announced in a video posted to social media, following a period of leave, that she had made the difficult decision to quit journalism. Sadly, journalism has changed a lot since I first stepped into a newsroom, and I'll be honest, I don't like the direction it's going, Lake said. I like the direction it's going. I think we need more citizen journalists. And less people. And I seem to enjoy most of Kari Lake's political stances, but she is corporate mainstream media, working for a big company that has probably a few $1 million. It's local, but still a few $1 million. In a dress, although that does not cost more than the building I live in, probably costs more than my truck. I found myself reading the news copy I didn't believe was fully truthful, or only told part of the story, and I began to fear that I was contributing to the fear and division in this country by continuing on this profession. Lake thanked her bosses for giving her the opportunity to cover big stories, then thanked her viewers and those she'd met in the community for their trust and friendship over the years. Lake worked at Fox 10 for 22 years, and at an NBC affiliate in Phoenix before that. In between times, she worked briefly as an anchor at WNYT in Albany, stepping into the shoes of Chris Jansing, now of MSDNC, and Bill Gudikunz, a media critic at the Arizona Republic, wrote on Lake's retirement from Fox 10. She did her share of responsible journalism over the years, but the latter part of her media career was perhaps more notable for controversies. In 2018, Lake apologized for tweeting that a movement around a teacher pay was actually a smokescreen for a big push to legalize pot. The following year, she found herself in a reefer-related hot water again, after she was caught on a hot mic referring to the Phoenix New Times, an alt weekly, as a rag for selling marijuana staffed by 20-year-old dopes. Somebody in Arizona tell me if there's actually any truth to that. The latter remarks came amid a broader controversy around Lake setting up an account on Parler, a social media site popular on the far right. Last year, when she was on leave, she joined Gab, an even fringier platform. She claims that her leave from Fox 10 was personal, not disciplinary. On her way out, she warned viewers to disregard any hit pieces about her that might be about to come out. Not everyone is dedicated to telling the truth, but thankfully, many of you have figured that out. I promise you, if you hear it from my lips, it will be truthful. A few months later, Lake announced that she was running for governor of Arizona as a Republican. The primary is today, and although the race has tightened as of late, Lake stands a strong chance of winning. Since announcing her candidacy, Lake has drawn national media scrutiny for advancing a range of extreme positions, most notably the big lie. She's already suggested her own upcoming elections being stolen. The Daily Beast has described her as an Exhibit A in the Trump's team plan to install friendly governors in states to potentially overturn votes in favor of 2024. Lake has won the backing of Rogues Gallery of election deniers, not least Trump himself. She is a fantastic person who spent many years working as a highly respected television anchor journalist, Trump said, as he endorsed Lake soon after she declared her candidacy last summer. Well, it sounds to me that CGR thinks that there's only a certain class of people who can be allowed to be in politics. That's part of the problem, is that this is no longer a by the people for the people. This is a by who we select for who we select. And if you're coming in from the Outsiders Club, you're an evil person. Blake Masters, speaking in Arizona, with his win party. I've heard this song before, but I don't know where. Blake Masters, of course, winning Senate candidate status in Arizona, endorsed by Trump. On the other side of the country, from CNN, Peter Meyer becomes second House Republican who voted for Trump impeachment to lose primary. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. From Gregory Krieg. Peter Meyer of Michigan, one of 10 House Republicans who voted to impeach former President Trump last year, has lost to a fervent election denier running with Trump's support, CNN projected on Wednesday. Republicans in Michigan and Arizona, 2 states at the center of Trump's 2020 election denial, voted on Tuesday in primaries for crucial federal and state contests as the shape of the 2022 midterms comes into focus less than 100 days from Election Day. Trump's picks will win the GOP gubernatorial nod in Michigan, as well as the GOP nominations for U.S. Senate, Secretary of State, and Attorney General in Arizona, CNN projects. In Arizona, one significant loss was that of State House Speaker Rusty Bowers, who delivered emotional testimony before the House January 6 Selfie Fest committee about its resolve in the face of enormous pressure to overturn the 2020 results. He'll lose a GOP state Senate primary, CNN projected early on Wednesday. Trump's loss in those battleground states 2 years ago seeded right-wing anger and turned Republican primary campaigns up and down ballot into referenda on his election lies. Oh, the editorialization. Ugh! Allies of the former president sought offices crucial to the balance of power in Washington and in state governments, where the GOP is hoping to gain control of the election apparatus ahead of the 2024 presidential contest. With his loss to former Trump admin official John Gibbs, Meyer became the second of the so-called impeachment 10 to lose re-election after South Carolina Rep. Tom Rice lost to Trump-backed challenger in June. It does look like 8 out of the 10 will be gone, but that will be because of jungle primaries. The 2 that are in Washington are in jungle primaries, but I do think from Washington it's going to be unlikely that they will win re-election. Though I think those seats are going to turn blue. Two others, Washington reps Jamie Herrera Butler and Dan Newhouse, were also facing challengers from their own party on Tuesday, but CNN has not yet projected whether they'll be advancing to the general election under Washington's primary system. The top 2 finishers regardless of party advance in November. Liz Cheney of Wyoming, perhaps the most high-profile of the House Republicans to have voted for impeachment because of her role as vice chair in the House Select Committee and her role as daughter of the most evil warmonger in history. Faces a Trump-backed opponent later this month, and then she will be gone. Of the impeachment 10, California Rep. David Valadao survived earlier this year, advancing to the November election in the Golden State's top 2 system, while 4 of the Republicans who voted for impeachment are not running for re-election. Meyer's primary in his Western Michigan district had become a flashpoint in both parties' national infighting because Gibbs was the beneficiary of the Democratic meddling. The party's House campaign, believing that Gibbs would be a less viable general election candidate, ran more than $300,000 in ads, ostensibly attacking his alliance with Trump, with the goal of boosting him in the primary. But that strategy angered some on the left who thought it was undermine it undermined their broader message against political extremism in the GOP, while sparking fears the gamble could backfire if Gibbs makes it to Congress. As CNN's K-File first reported in 2018, Gibbs has a history of conspiratorial and inflammatory tweets and defended notorious anti-Semitic trolls banned by Twitter. In Michigan's gubernatorial primary, Trump-backed Tudor Dixon had the support of former Education Secretary Betsy DeVos and benefited from disqualification of 5 would-be candidates after thousands of forged signatures were found in nominating petitions. A conservative commentator who had coalesced support from prominent Republicans of the state, Dixon beat back criticism that she was an establishment candidate who wasn't MAGA enough. So this was headline. This was headline trash. This article has absolutely nothing to do with Peter Meyer, who, by the way, is going to be losing. Top Gun. I've never seen that movie. So let's talk about one that actually is about Peter Meyer. From our friends over at NPR, Peter Meyer narrowly loses to Trump-endorsed challenger in Michigan primary. And this is from Elena Moore. And remember, hit that donate button, because NPR will tell you which Democrats you need to vote for, which is all of them, and why Republicanism is evil. But they need our money, comrade, to do so. So hit that donate button, because it's not your money, comrade, it's our money. So, let's see what it is that they have to say over on NPR, Never Printing Reality, National Progressive Radio. Let's listen. Peter Meyer, who voted to impeach former President Trump after the Capitol Selfie Fest, has narrowly lost his Republican primary to Trump-backed conservative challenger John Gibbs, according to a race call by the Associated Press. Hillary Scholten was running uncontested, and Gibbs won by 4,000 votes, or just a little bit over 2%. Under 2%, rather. I'm sorry. Meyer, a moderate freshman Republican, was just one of 10 House GOP members who voted to impeach Trump after the January 6th Selfie Fest. Gibbs, a former Trump appointee to the Department of Housing and Urban Development, echoes similar rhetoric as the former president about denying the results of the 2020 presidential election. Gibbs will face off against Democratic nominee Hillary Scholten in November. Scholten, a former lawyer at the Department of Justice, lost to Meyer in 2020 by over 6 percentage points. But following redistricting, Michigan's 3rd Congressional District looks different than it did 2 years ago. The Grand Rapids-based district now leans more Democratic than in previous cycles and is considered a toss-up by the Cook Political Report. And in a year in which Democrats are in serious jeopardy of losing their majority in the House, the party is eyeing Michigan's 3rd as a potential get. Tensions rose between Meyer and House Democrats last week after the DCCC released an ad against Gibbs, painting him as too conservative for West Michigan. Meyer claimed the 30-second ad would benefit Gibbs in the Republican primary. But given the district is a toss-up seat, voters nominating a more extreme conservative in the primary could hurt Republican chances of keeping it red in November. You would think that Democrats would look at John Gibbs and see the embodiment of what they most fear, Meyer wrote in an opinion piece published the day before his primary. That as patriots, they would use every tool at their disposal to defeat him and similar candidates, as they've said are an existential threat. Instead, they are funding Gibbs, he added. The DCCC has declined to comment on the advertisement, which reportedly cost $425,000. Well, I guess we'll see what happens, but I would love to see this come back and bite them in the behind. Hey, we thought that this would be an easy one to win. Some salty tears for you. Kinzinger on Meyer defeat. Democrats own that. From Lexi Lonis. Adam Kinzinger blamed Democrats on CNN's New Day Wednesday after moderate GOP Rep. Meyer was defeated in his primary election by a Trump-endorsed candidate. Meyer, who voted to impeach after the 2021 Capitol attack, lost to Trump-backed challenger John Gibb on Tuesday after the Democratic Congressional Committee spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on ads supporting Gibbs. If Peter's opponent wins and goes on in November to win, the Democrats own that. Congratulations. Here's the thing. Don't keep coming to me asking where all the good Republicans that defend democracy and take your donors' money to spend $500,000 promoting one of the worst election deniers that's out there. He's a heretic! A heretic! Although some Democrats, like Kinzinger, have spoken out against the DCCC strategy, top Democratic officials such as Pelosi have come out in favor of the tactic. The political decisions that are made out here are made in furtherance of our winning of the elections, Pelosi said last week, because we think the contrast between Democrats and Republicans, as they are now, is so drastic that we have to win. All right, here's one for you. GOP watch party in Lansing canceled due to threats. From Fox 17. A GOP election watch party was canceled in Lansing after receiving threats on Tuesday. Michigan Republican Party Deputy Chief of Staff Communications Director Gustavo Portillo says one person verbally berated a female staffer and made threats that involved shooting the building. Someone also claimed the woman should be enslaved, while also threatening to set fire to the building, according to Portela. We're told the watch party has been canceled as a precaution. Yeah, that sounds like somebody who's definitely got it all together, doesn't it? Doesn't it? So, that is your election day wrap-up from yesterday, because, I mean, everything was still coming in and pouring in while we were on yesterday. And yet they still have to go count or find more ballots in Maricopa County. Let's talk about why gas might be going down here. Biden admin approves potential multi-billion-dollar arms sales to Saudi Arabia and the UAE. From CNN. The Biden admin on Tuesday approved and notified Congress of a possible multi-billion-dollar weapons sale to both Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. The notice of the approval comes just weeks after President Biden met with the leaders of each nation in Jeddah, as he sought to improve relations between the U.S. and the Saudis. How much of that Raytheon money goes back into Biden's pocket? The approval was also notified on the same day the United Nations announced a 2-month extension on the truce in Yemen, where the Saudi-led coalition and the Houthi rebel group had, until recent months, been engaged in a years-long bloody conflict that killed thousands of civilians that we started. According to a news release from the U.S. State Department, the agency approved a possible sale of Patriot MIM-104E guidance-enhanced missile tactical ballistic missiles and related equipment to Saudi Arabia for an estimated $3.05 billion with a B. This proposed sale will support foreign policy goals and national security objectives in the U.S. by improving the security of a partner country that is a force for political stability and economic progress in the Gulf region, the State Department said of the sale. The proposed sale will improve the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia's capability to meet current and future threats by replenishing its dwindling stock of Patriot GEM-T missiles, it said. These missiles are used to defend the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia's borders against persistent Houthi cross-border unmanned aerial systems and ballistic missile attacks on civilian sites and critical infrastructure in Saudi Arabia. And now Saudi Arabia is going to go turn on the pump. These attacks threaten the well-being of Saudi, international, and U.S. citizens, approximately 70,000 residing in the kingdom. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia will have no difficulty absorbing these missiles into its armed forces, it added. Of course it won't. Of course it won't! A little bit of one that's raised some questions in various discords that I've been in. 1 killed, 13 injured, a massive warehouse fire near Moscow. A massive fire engulfed a warehouse outside Moscow on Wednesday, killing at least 1 person, injuring 3 others, and leaving 2 missing. The fire at a warehouse belonging to Russia's leading online retailer, Ozon, affected an area of 50,000 square meters. Emergencies officials said that 1 person died in the fire, and Moscow Region Governor Andrei Borobyov said that 2 people are unaccounted for. Officials say that 2 of the injured were hospitalized. Not a lot of information on this or what was in the warehouse, but I know that people have a lot of questions, and people are saying that this glows a little bit. From Reuters, U.S. Senate expected to approve Finland and Sweden joining NATO because, of course, they are. From Patricia Zengerle. The U.S. Senate was due to vote on Wednesday on Finland and Sweden's ascension to NATO, the most significant expansion of the 30-member alliance since the 90s, as it faces the fallout from Russia's invasion of the Ukraine. A 100-member Senate was expected to easily surpass the 2/3 majority. 67 votes required to support ratification of the 2 countries' accession documents. Most Democrats and Republicans have expressed strong support for the expansion. Last month, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee backed ratification by voice vote, with just one of the panel's 22 members opting to vote present. Senate Majority Leader Chuck U. Schumer invited the ambassadors and other diplomats from the 2 countries in Washington to watch the debate and vote. The NATO vote is very important. The NATO vote is very important for American security around the world. Finland's and Sweden's membership will strengthen NATO even further and even more urgently given Russian aggression, Schumer said in remarks opening the Senate on Wednesday. The final vote and the panic attack coming from the left. "95 to 1-1 Senate votes to approve a resolution in favor of Finland and Sweden joining NATO." The lone no vote was Josh Hawley. Rand Paul voted present. Even Bernie Sanders, who is on record saying that there should be no more expansion of NATO, is on record voting for this.
On this vote, the yeas are 95, the nays are 1, and 1 senator responded present. 2/3 of the senators present, a quorum being present, having voted in the affirmative, the resolution of ratification is agreed to. On this vote, the yeas are 95, the nays are 1, and 1 senator.
As far as joining NATO, really honestly, it doesn't matter to me, because they're not going to do anything without us anyway. It's just a couple more countries that we're already protecting with our military that are going to be protected by our military. All right, from NBC, Israel strikes UN deal to send thousands of African migrants to Western countries. I wonder if this is like Abbott-level stuff on steroids. From Reuters, Israel said on Monday it's canceled a plan to deport African migrants to Africa and reached an agreement with the UN Refugee Agency to send more than 16,000 to Western countries instead. Other migrants, many of whom are seeking asylum, will be allowed to remain in Israel for at least the next 5 years, PM Benjamin Netanyahu's office said in a statement. The fate of some 37,000 Africans in Israel has posed a moral dilemma for the state founded as a haven for Jews. From a persecution in a national home, the right-wing government is under pressure from its nationalist voter base to expel the migrants, while others are calling for them to be taken in. You should send them to Arabian countries and see what happens to them. In February, Israel started handing out notices to 20,000 male African migrants, giving them 2 months to leave the country or risk being thrown in jail. The Israeli government offered migrants, most of whom are from Sudan and Eritrea, $3,500 and a plane ticket to what it says is a safe destination in another country in sub-Saharan Africa, which Israeli media reports identified as Rwanda. But rights groups are advocating on behalf of the migrants say that many of them fled abuse and war, and their expulsion, even to a different country in Africa, would endanger them further. The groups had challenged the deportation plan in Israel's High Court, which on March 15th issued a temporary order that froze its implementation. So now they're headed to Europe instead. Well, we'll see what happens with that. Maybe someone will come over here. We'll see what happens with that. From the post-millennial. White House admits Inflation Reduction Act will barely have an impact. Economic experts in the Biden admin have come to a consensus regarding the Inflation Reduction Act, agreeing that $739 billion of Democratic spending will do next to nothing to combat inflated prices over the next decade. The massive spending package, which raises taxes for everyone except those making between $10K and $30K a year, and offers incentives for Americans to spend money converting their personal energy usage to depend on renewable energy, will offset inflation by only 0.33% by 2031. Let's see what this is.
Country.
So let me ask you specifically what cuts inflation in this bill?
Let me ask you this. How in the world could it be inflation when you're cutting? My Republican friends always said, we got to start paying down debt. I've been a budget hawk my whole life. We're paying down $300 billion. You're saying massive expenses? 3.5 trillion in BBB was massive expenses.
You asked me a direct question, so I'm going to answer you. So how is it not a straight line? Because I'm not saying, and even Penn Wharton isn't saying that it won't eventually get there in a jagged line. But you know how it doesn't? Because we are cooking a higher rate of inflation right now ahead of wages. And even if everybody were to go out and get a job or 2 or 3 jobs right now, their wages can't keep up with what the cost of milk, bread, gas, so on and so forth.
Don't you think we ought to get those costs down? How you do that? By producing. You've got to produce your way out of this. You can't sit back and wait your way out of it.
So you're going to open pipelines?
Absolutely. We're going to build pipelines. We're going to do more drilling.
How are you going to sell that to the President of the United States, who on day one
it's already been sold and bought? It's already been. It's part of the deal. It's part of the bill. All you have to do is read the bill, Harris, and you'll see. You're not going to be able to do any more offshore wind or offshore or onshore solar and wind unless we're absolutely doing more production with drilling and extraction. It's all part of a balanced approach. We need more energy today, and we also need to invest in the energy for the future. This is a balanced approach that everyone's been talking about, but everyone's upset for whatever reason because they're afraid it's a political bill. This is not a Democrat bill. This is not a...
It is a political bill. We'll see who actually signs on to it, but it's a political bill.
Republican bill.
All right.
This is not a green deal. This is a red, white, and blue deal, Harris. And everyone's having a hard time understanding that we can walk and chew gum and do the great thing together if we'll still start looking at our country first and quit worrying about our politics.
What they see is a senator who they thought was moderate, who might push back on some of the talk about forcing us into a green situation.
I have pushed back on everything.
Let's talk taxes.
And if you think I'm going to roll over, I've been at this for 40 years. I have never, ever, ever been pushed into doing something I didn't think was right for my state and my country.
Oh, you poor, poor, stupid man. Moody's Analytics chief economist Mark Zandi has noted the bill recently agreed on by Schumer and Manchin only marginally reduced the consumer price index, an economic gauge, on the price consumers pay for goods and services, and even that slim savings won't be seen until the later half of the decade. Through the middle class of this decade, the impact of legislation on inflation is marginal, but it becomes more meaningful later in the decade, Zandi wrote in a report from Moody's Analytics. In response to Zane's findings, Jesse Lee, senior advisor communications for the National Economic Council, said, "This is actually the overwhelming consensus." Andy Quinn, chief speechwriter and strategic comms director for Turtleman McConnell, wrote on Twitter, "White House officials' own rosiest best-case scenario spin is that the Inflation Reduction Act will have taken 1/3 of a percentage point off inflation by 9 years from now." So, yeah, this isn't going to do anything, and honestly, it's probably going to make things a little bit worse. And I love Manchin. Well, this is not a political bill. It's not political at all. It's red, white, and blue. No, this is full-on partisan, and that's why you're hoping to get 50 votes plus Kamala to go pass it. Daniel Horowitz writes what I think a lot of us are thinking right now. You know, a lot of people come out and praise McConnell for using the end of the judicial filibuster for Supreme Court nominees, and also using Harry Reid's judicial filibuster ending to fill more court seats than any other Senate Majority Leader in history. Which is all fine and well and good, but it's time to go back to filibuster on both of those. And furthermore, as Horowitz puts out, it's time for the GOP to shut down the budget process to block Build Back Better reconciliation bill. From Daniel Horowitz. After agreeing to pass a $280 billion mini Build Back Better bill last week, Republicans gave up their leverage to block Democrats from using budget reconciliation to raise $739 billion in taxes and spend $433 billion fundamentally transforming healthcare, agriculture, and energy. While Republicans are vowing to fight this tax and spend bill, they have failed to publicly float the nuclear option, aka blocking the fiscal year 2023 continuing resolution if Democrats pass the reconciliation bill. I think that's supposed to be flout, not float. They need to understand that this bill is much worse than the typical tax and spend bill, and therefore requires them to proverbially lie down on the tracks to prevent it passing. Aside from extending Obamacare itself in this bill, another $100 billion in spending for the healthcare cartel, the Orwellian named Inflation Reduction Act of 2022 will do to agriculture and energy what the ACA did to healthcare. The bill will essentially create a government-run monopoly for wind, solar, and transform our economy away from energy that works to sources that don't work. If you like what you see in Germany, with edicts to take cold showers and turn the lights off because the country went green, you will love this new BBB bill. Despite years of subsidies, totaling over $100 billion for green energy that failed to yield a breakout in its utility for consumers, the bill throws $30 billion at the states to transition to green energy. In addition, the bill creates a $7,500 tax credit for EVs, which cost an average of $66,000, a clear handout for the elites. They have not been shy about their desire to for us to transition to only purchasing EVs, and this bill will attempt to socially engineer that outcome. The bill also increases subsidies for biofuels, which increase the cost of fuel and food. And speaking of food prices, the bill increases spending on conservation programs by $20 billion over 5 years. For years, our government has de facto paid farmers not to grow crops by enrolling up to 25 million acres annually in Conservation Reserve Program. The program has incentivized wealthy landowners to buy up land from real farmers to keep it dormant in order to save the planet from the weather. The program does nothing but enrich wealthy landowners and further inflate the cost of land, just like any subsidized asset bubble. all the while reducing the supply of crops. This bill will further exacerbate the trend of Bill Gates and his ilk buying up land to ensure that American farming as we know it is transformed. After offering leftist prize industries tailwinds in the economy, the bill has headwinds planned for the industries they don't like, namely oil, gas, and coal. The bill imposes, Section 60113 for the first time, a methane tax of $1,500 per ton on the oil and gas industry for excess methane emissions. In addition, Section 50261, the bill increases royalties for drilling on federal offshore lands from 12.5% to between 16 2/3% and 18.5%. It contains numerous other fees increases up and down the process of leasing and using lands, which will collectively make the process more expensive and pass the cost down to consumers at a time when they are suffering from record costs. As such, Republicans cannot afford to fake a fight for this as they do other spending bills. They must lay it all on the line. There are two must-pass bills coming up before the end of the fiscal year on September 30th, FY 2023 budget bill and the defense authorization bill. Now it's the time for them to make a stand and refuse to supply the 60 votes to pass those bills unless Schumer backs down on budget reconciliation. Although the reconciliation bill can be passed with 51 votes, the budget bill is still subject to a filibuster. If Republicans cannot hold the budget bill hostage in the minority when Democrats are extremely unpopular, nothing will change when they are in the majority. So, that is how we see everything coming off this. I honestly think it's time to end the budget reconciliation process entirely. If you want to pass something, it should have the support of 60 people, or at least have the ability for somebody to come in and say, I think this needs the support of 60 people. I think under most circumstances, you should be able to go back and go under there and say, hey, you know what? We'll pass this by simple majority. But if somebody has an opposition, because his constituents have an opposition, he should be able to stand up and say, I object. Let's get this figured out and let's get this blocked. Unless you can get 60 votes to overcome me. I think that's the way this entire country should be done. And yes, we should be doing this with judicial nominees, with Supreme Court justices, with budget reconciliation. I think Daniel Horowitz is absolutely right on this. Coal industry leaders blast Manchin for supporting bill that threatens to kill the industry. From John Rigolizzo. And we're starting, by the way, to see why it was so important for them to get this passed as soon as possible, even though they haven't. Because 4chan has got a hold of it, they've picked it apart line by line, and they're starting to leak out the information that's in it. Coal industry leaders have blasted Senator Manchin for his agreement with Democratic leadership on a climate and tax-focused reconciliation bill that they say would severely threaten the industry. In a statement on Wednesday, America's State Coal Associations, a group for 8 state trade organizations in the coal industry, blistered Manchin for endorsing the so-called Inflation Reduction Act. A group said that Manchin's support for the package, which has been lauded by the Biden admin and praised the climate activists like Biden's climate czar, John Kerry, leads the coal industry to question the motivation and sincerity of Manchin's interest in protecting fossil fuels. He doesn't have one. The more you read into just the provisions found in over 700 plus pages of legislative digest, the more it becomes abundantly clear the legislation will serve to severely threaten American coal and the $261 billion of annual revenue that it produces for the nation's overall economy and attendant 381,000 American jobs, the coal associations wrote. The legislation is so egregious it leaves those of us that call for Senator Manchin a friend shocked and disheartened. Manchin has seemingly fought against numerous climate measures advanced over the past year by the National Democratic establishment, insisting that America's coal assets be protected and allowed to continue to operate. As the carbon reduction strategies are developed and proven to be effective within reasonable cost and performance parameters, the current Schumer-Manchin draft agreement on climate and energy frankly leaves us questioning the motivation and sincerity of Manchin's previous stance and his repeated chant, "We must innovate, not eliminate." Pick me, pick me. I know his motivation. I know what he's looking for. He got a handout. The group went on to blast the bill itself, pointing out that it was praised by Joe Biden, who called it the most significant legislation in history to tackle the climate crisis. In remarks last week, the statement also pointed out that Pelosi and Bernie Sanders have signed off on the bill, which alone speaks volumes to the extreme and deadly scenario it brings our nation's coal industry. So many people were saying Manchin was so based. And you know what? I said, it's kind of cool that he's doing this kind of stuff. But you got to watch him like a hawk. Because he will turn around and put the knife in your back. Guess who was right? Speaking of EVs and the credits that are in there, something to point out. Now, most people don't see these full numbers because they go down, they put their card in, they never see what the amount is. And a lot of people that have these EVs live in extremely progressive cities. Madison, Milwaukee, Chicago, etc. Where they go in with their Tesla, they run into the Hy-Vee, put the card in next to the charging station. They do this at Woodman's down in Janesville too, actually. They charge up at home and build up their own energy grid, but big thing to notice with a lot of people driving around now is they don't do the big long trips like they used to. Like the trip that I just drove to Georgia is like an unheard of trip in most cases. It happens, but it's completely unheard of. It doesn't happen often. People don't road trip like they used to. They plug the car in at home. They get out of the car, they run down to the Hy-Vee, they plug it back in and put the card in for it. They run over to the video game store that's got the charging port in front of it. They plug it back in, drive back home. They never get to see this. But when you're out on the road, especially, this is going to become a big thing. I mean, when you're at home, it's going to affect your electric bill, but like, oh, well, just pay it. Oh, I wonder why my electric's going up. It must be evil Republicans blocking climate agendas. But Barius Kokener puts this infographic out, breaking down the numbers for us. Electric vehicle charging station today. Guess the price to charge. Yep, 32 cents a minute. That is $19.20 an hour. It takes 8 hours for a full charge. That is $153.60 for a full charge. And most electric vehicles get about 350 miles on a charge. That is 44 cents a mile. An F-350 pulling a horse trailer gets better mileage. Now, my question there, is that going to be the 6.7 or is that going to be... what's the big one? What's the big V8 that they have? I don't even know anymore. But is that going to be gas or diesel? $0.44 a mile. Think about that for just a second. And again, I do have to sit back and wonder, if you break down the increase in your electric bill, how much that actually turns out to be. Yeah, that's the other question is I mean, you're down for 8 hours on only 350 is only like 6 hours of driving. I've driven 17 hours straight through. I do not recommend ever doing that again, by the way. Because that was a pain even when I was 23. That took a toll on my body. I've done a 17-hour drive straight through. It takes a toll on you. But then you go 6 hours and you're on downtime for 8. And then you go for another 6 hours and you're on downtime for 8. No, they axed the V10. Which is lame because that was actually kind of cool engine. Kind of wanted a V10. Thought about buying one. But then I realized I didn't want a dually or a crew cab. So, that's what we see for that. Let's do one more, and then we've actually got to do thing I like and thing I hate and head out of here. But since we're doing automotives and economy here, here's a question. If you actually think that the economy is doing well, does this sound like an economy that's doing well? From Fox News, Houston task force busts catalytic converter theft ring with $12 million in stolen goods and guns. From Bradford Betts. Houston authorities apprehended 6 individuals last week in connection with a crime ring that had nearly $12 million of stolen catalytic converters, firearms, and a Challenger Hellcat. The months-long investigation stemmed from the death of a Harris County Sheriff's deputy, Darren Almendarez, who was shot while trying to stop thieves from stealing his catalytic converter, according to ICE. The individuals arrested for their role in the theft were Houston residents Jose Martinez, Armando Martinez, Isaac Castillo, Terrence Elder, Armando Martinez Sr., and Dayton resident Jose Sanchez. Evil white boys. All of them. Police say the culprits promoted their alleged catalytic converter enterprise online by advertising parts of vehicles that had been stolen. Martinez Sr. is charged with engaging in organized crime and released on bond before being taken back into custody on 2 charges, with a $75,000 bond on each charge. KHOU reported. Martinez Jr. is charged with aggregate theft and 2 counts of organizing crime. His bond was set at $200,000. Jose Martinez is charged with engaging in criminal activity. His bond was also set at $200,000. Elder is in charge with engaging in criminal activity. His bond was set at $35,000. Castillo and Sanchez remain in custody, but additional details weren't available. Catalytic converter thefts have been on the rise in recent months, particularly in the Houston area, amid the highest demand for cars and replacement parts in years. Funny story about this. So there is this e-thought that I found on Tinder a while back. I didn't realize when I was trying to match with her that she was an e-thought. But I thought she was good looking, and I followed her on Instagram, only to find out that she's an e-thought. And she posted on a story one day on the Instagram stories, you can put in, hey, here's a question, write your suggestions, and I'll put them back out anonymously. I can see who you are, but I'll put them back out anonymously. And the question that she had posed was, does anybody know a place in Milwaukee where you can get a cage put around your catalytic converter, because I'm feeling afraid that somebody's going to steal my catalytic converter and I want to go have a cage put around it. Does anybody have any recommendations? And I replied to it. And I said, my recommendation is get the hell out of Milwaukee as fast as you can. And I didn't think anything much of it. I didn't think I was going to get a response because she's an e-thought. She has people that simp for her that she needs to pretend that she's interested in. And instead, I got an angry DM back from it that says, how is that even remotely helpful? I don't know. I got out of Eastern Wisconsin and it was helpful to my mental health, my finances, and everything else about my life. Maybe you should think about it. I didn't respond back. That was my idea. Where's yours? That's what I should have said. Alright. And with that, we are going to save these last 5 tabs over here. We'll do those tomorrow, along with live chat, by the way. And I do see you guys chatting, and I think that's awesome. So if you do want to get a thank you at the end of the week, make sure you say at least one thing in the chat so I get a registration on your name. And then I add you to the notebook and I say on Friday, hey, thanks. Thanks for making the show what it is. Maintain an average of 10 viewers today. That was pretty cool. But for now, because it's Thursday, we're going to head out of here with a thing that I like and a thing that I hate. And I already teased what the thing that I hate is going to be. So let's do a thing that I like. Continuing on the themes of video games that I like. Now, I haven't actually played this game in a long time. But a discussion in Mr. Behavior's Discord, not in his Discord, in his Twitch chat one day, led me almost to going to Madison and buying this for him as a wedding present. Because he did just get married, by the way. To you, Mr. Behavior, the Mazelist of Tovs. John's also getting married on Monday, so the Mazelist of Tovs to him. But we were discussing, and he had said that he always wanted to play Mega Man X Command Mission, and I suggested that I had the GameCube version. There are subtle differences between the two versions, the GameCube and the PS2 version, but I said that for a wedding present, I'm going to see if I can find it for him. And get it for him, and mail it out to him, and then he texted me 2 days later and said, don't worry about it, man. I got this. I already got it. I picked it up. I found it really quick. And this is probably one of the better entries in the Mega Man series for a series that I love. I've written a blog post arguing the question as to whether or not it was an actual virus in the Mega Man X series that was causing the sentient robots to go maverick against people, or if it actually was the consequence of their free will. So the game in question right now is one of the last ones chronologically in the series, but the second to last one in our time in the series, Mega Man X Command Mission, and it takes a different format from any other Mega Man X game, and the fact that it's not actually a platformer. It does have some platform elements, but it's not actually a platform, it's a turn-based RPG, which adds to the fun, and it's done up very well by several prominent Japanese names who are big in the JRPG genre. It was very well done. I played it beginning to the end, and that is one of them that I want to put on my list of games that we play. I need to get a capture card to do it, but yeah, I want to put that on my list of games that we play on stream, because I think that'd be a lot of fun. I think you guys would enjoy that, honestly. I enjoyed it. It's probably one of the better storied Mega Man X games, of course, because it's an RPG, not a platform. They put a large amount of story into it. It's got new characters. It's got new dialogue. It's got the ability to interface and change weapons as the situation needs, just like a good JRPG, plus the rock, paper, scissors aspect of finding a weakness and exploiting the weakness for each boss as you go, although it doesn't have quite the open-ended order like most Mega Man X games had. That's the one downer to it that I found, is that it doesn't really have the open-ended aspect to it. But for this, let's watch the trailer for Mega Man X Command Mission. So, that it is. Mega Man X Command Mission. If you have a PS2 or a GameCube, or the ability to emulate one of the two of them, well, if you have the ability to emulate them, don't tell me about it, because that would be wrong. And of course, you're only using proper backups of things that you already own, and in fact, not getting them peer-to-peer online, because you would never do a thing like that. But if you have this, or the ability to emulate that, I recommend giving it a try. It's a lot of fun. It's turn-based again, so it's a little bit slower paced than the original Mega Man X series, but still, a lot of fun. Probably one of my favorites. And now let's go to a thing that I hate. So, going back to what we talked about earlier on, from CNN tweets out, Indiana GOP Rep Jackie Walorski has died in a car accident that also killed two of Walorski's staffers, House Republican leaders announced. So, we read the article already. We talked about what this means and what happened with that. Now I want to talk about the comment section, because it is hot garbage. Even some of the backhanded ones in there are just hot garbage. Jacob, a Democrat apparently, is someone who is not very much not a member of the GOP in any conceivable way. For those saying good or no sympathy for me, need to stop. She was a person, a family, and loved ones no matter if you don't agree with her politics, and my condolences go out to the people close to her. To which Freezy Penguin comes back and replies, for what she pushed for, I won't feel any emotion over her, but you do have to remember she was someone's daughter who had family who will be emotional over it. It's understandable not to feel sympathy for bad people, but be understanding of their friends and loved ones and be respectful. What a piece of garbage. Texas Tiger Lady says, so she was a bad person because her politics don't align with yours. That's not how God sees things. And the Barking Gallery, she was the Gladys Kravitz of millions of other women's vaginas and human rights thief. Who cares what the Sky Fairy thinks? Let's see, let's get some more off of this. It was a crash, not an accident. No mention of the fourth person in the other car that died when Walorski went over the center line and hit her head on. Sad. From what I understand from the breakdown of the accident, it was the person in the other car that went over the center line, not Walorski. This one is hot garbage. Sad loss of a good Republican. Tyra Lynn Neville. Good and Republican in the same sentence. I think those two things don't even remotely relate to each other. There's no such thing as a good Republican to me. Jupiter. As a Hoosier, it's not really that sad, actually. And then, of course, somebody else coming up to bring up the vote. Hey, is this her? To which Trado says, zero class, politics must be your religion. And then bringing up 538. Walorski, Trump position opposed, Walorski vote no. Agree with Trump. Objecting to Pennsylvania's presidential electors, Trump position support, Walorski vote yes. Objecting to Arizona presidential electors, Trump position support, Walorski vote yes. Is no one asking who was at fault for the crash? It was the person in the other car. This one. She just said it was God's will. No. This is horrifying. Oh my God. Sadly, Jesus doesn't help anyone, but lowering speed limits does in the Midwest. The freeways are full of speeders going 90 to 100. No one stops them. We need automatic ticketing radar devices installed to end this. Just in north of Canada, people drive only 62 miles an hour on the freeway. Automatic ticketing radar devices. No. James McCarthy, what did she have on Hillary? This one, Bethacito says, don't say no sympathy, just don't. You may not have agreed with her. You may not have liked her, but being nasty was what MAGA would do. We're better than that. Sympathies to her friends and family. I'm going to comment on this one on air. And this goes along, and I've said things about HW. I probably will say things about W when he passes, but I'm not going to do it right off the day that it happens. There are special places in hell. McCain too. There are a lot of people who have said nasty things about McCain for good reason. But it was the Democrats who were saying nasty things about McCain before the body was cold, and then his Republican challengers who were saying them after the amount of time had passed for grief. There's no class in any of this. I am slightly guilty of it. I'm not going to lie about it. But to see the level that some of these are going makes me look like a saint in the criticisms that I've made over the people who have passed. This is horrifying. This is absolutely horrifying, the level that goes with this. And that's one of the things that I really, really hate the most. And with that, we're done. We'll head out of here for the day. Alright, where's the outro music? So this particular track that's in the background right now has quote from some sort of movie, and I've never seen it, and I can't completely make it out what it says either. I've listened to it a few times, and it's kind of interesting because it's kind of chilling among the lo-fi-ish background music, but of course, having never seen a movie, I have no idea what movie it is. But we gotta head out of here for the day. So, thanks everybody who came by, chatted, hung out with us, kept me on point, kept me honest. There's a lot of chatter in there today. We'll be back here tomorrow with more news, more headlines, and more stuff. Plus, tomorrow afternoon, I will be going to the Trump rally, which I gotta touch base with a person who's probably going to be my cameraman, and we will see what happens with that. So, come back and join us as we go check out what's happening, and as we see what's going to be happening coming up in the weekend here. Where we're going to go. We'll see if we're at war with China by the end of the day. We will see if we are possibly in a recession already, now that we're starting to see the jobless claims go up. We'll see if the Dow drops throughout the day. We'll see all of this here tomorrow, plus all the news that's fit to print and the 5 articles that we missed over here on Contemporary. We will see you here tomorrow for more news and more headlines, and the live chat as well, so definitely be there for that. Stick around if you're on Twitch for the raid, and we'll see you next time over here on Contemporary. And until then, I am Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Take care.